What is up? This is the Keyholing podcast with Lemon. This week, we're talking about a somber subject, but I have the legend, the high point goat. The low point goat, actually, but the high point harasser. How are you doing today, goat?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you, brother?
Good, good. And first, we'll start off. I'm very happy to be talking to you today. Everyone, particularly if you're newer, you may not know, Goat is one of the OGs. He really popularized harassing high point for parts kits to the point that it became a huge meme, super funny, and a meme that still continues today. I know you aren't online as much, you have other stuff going on, but we are still harassing them. We are still bugging them. I recently got word that someone went up to them at an event and asked, and they sighed so heavily and started shaking their head. So we're breaking them. we're breaking them. We're here to talk about Joseph the Parrot, the legend being targeted by the Brazilian government, and really a symbol of what the government wants to do to people who value freedom. And it's tragic. He's one of your good friends. So thank you for coming on to talk about this, because I know this is emotional, and we just want to give everyone all the information, because there is still a lot of confusion, and I know Vega's been helping out a lot, but translations get mixed up and things like that, so a lot of people really don't understand. But first, I kind of want to talk about who he was as a person, getting to know him. How was your first interaction with him in person?
Well, we had worked together for several years online, just collaborating on different projects and providing support for one another. But the first time we met in person was at the MoneroCon conference in 2025 in Prague, Czechia. He was doing a Kuno fundraiser, which is a crowdfunding platform for XMR Monero, and basically raised enough money through donations of his supporters to sort of fund his entire trip so he could go speak there in person as opposed to having to do it remotely. And at the time, I was working on publishing a film photography photo book profiling, prominent people in the gun cat space. And so it was kind of a good convergence of opportunities where I can go and document his experience there and his presentation at the conference, but I also didn't feel comfortable with him going to Europe alone. So I felt like he just needed someone to kind of accompany him and just watch his back. Because Czechia, they are one of the more like gun friendly countries in the EU, but it's still like you're kind of going into the belly of the beast in Europe in that regard. So we made the plans together to meet up. He was flying from Brazil, I was flying out from America, and that's sort of where we were able to have our first in real life meeting and sort of bond over this experience of attending the conference, exploring a new city and just making a lot of really, really amazing memories together.
Which is so awesome. And there's something so intimate about like traveling together, being on a new adventure together. I'm so glad you guys got to experience that. And we'll keep talking about the case throughout, but a huge part of the case is this attending MoneroCon, but also taking cryptocurrency donations, correct?
Correct, yeah. Even prior to him considering speaking at the conference, he had been accepting crypto donations, Bitcoin, primarily XMR, Monero. Um, so the privacy community and the Monero community had always been some of his strongest supporters, where he was able to treat it not necessarily as a full-time job, but to make some income where people were donating based off of the value of the work he was doing because they believed in his work, his philosophy, and his mentality. And so he was always consistently receiving donations and support through the coin. So it made sense for him to, attend the conference and share his work there. And again, that community was very enthusiastic about supporting him and getting him the funding he needed to get him out there, because he told me that just with the way taxation is in Brazil, people don't really keep or retain much of what they earn. They're kind of taxed to death. Like Brazil is a very authoritarian country in many regards. And so if he were to try and actually keep things afloat, keep his family, taken care of, keep the lights on, keep food in the fridge and the cupboards, he said it would have taken him like, a couple decades to actually save that kind of money to make the trip. So it was very much a blessing to have that kind of support. Um, but it did end up becoming a part of the indictment against him for sure.
And that kind of is the goal of these governments. Like that's part of their goal. Part of it obviously is the firearm aspect and things of that nature, but a huge part of it is keeping people destitute, limiting any mobility people have to grow their finances, grow businesses, things of that nature. And you talk about it being particularly rough in Brazil, but that's an issue a lot of the EU devs and Australia, some Australian devs have as well. Obviously, is around the world, and I know while a lot of guns aren't necessarily developed in the U.S., it real and we obviously a ton of freedoms that are actively trying to be taken away, but really a last bastion of a place where you can do this without it being like illegal and targeted for it. It's kind of wild.
Well, absolutely. And that was part of sort of the slogan or the mantra behind a lot of his work was, designed in Brazil, tested in America, made at home. So nothing he was doing at all through his career has ever been illegal. He was only doing design work, and all the testing was handled by team members here in America or in other places. Um,
Absolutely, the legend R. Smith 28, a prolific tester.
mhm.
Um, and I think that is an aspect people get confused on in the case. They think, oh, he was building and testing these guns, testing the FRT option, testing the silencer. No, he was just doing CAD. Like that's it. It was just CAD.
Correct. And any revision she would make would be based off of feedback from the testing process here in the United States of America. Um, but because of his philosophy and because of, pushing decentralized systems, pushing DIY, and like pushing privacy, and really being an advocate for human rights. And I think most of us in the community, I know we all sort of share that philosophy that all human rights are downstream of self defense and downstream of violence. And decentralizing that monopoly on violence is a very threatening thing to the state. So even if he's not breaking any laws, he's still very much a threat to power and control structures. But as his career continued, after the MoneroCon conference, he made a pivot in his life and career where he registered with the Brazilian army and the Brazilian government and developed like a legitimate like firearms research company where he had the equivalent of an FFL and an SOT. And we have all the documents for the registration from the Brazilian government. It's all available on our tracker portal. All the information for the case is available there. So anyone who wants to go verify and learn more about it, like we have access to those documents for you, where you can see the dockets, you can see his registration forms, where he's allowed to develop semi-automatic, automatic prototypes, and he was working with the Brazilian army and government. Um, and so he went completely legit, and still found himself being dragged through the briar of the Brazilian legal system because that philosophy, that mentality is a threat. And you see it in certain ways here, even in America, where the legal system can be weaponized against people to sort of destroy their lives, their careers, their livelihoods, crush them financially, and sort of try or attempt to discourage them or demoralize them for continuing down the path they're on. But what I found most impressive about the Parrot is he always spoke very loudly about like if I ever got arrested, if I was ever, executed by the state, any of those like extremities, he always said it would all be worth it. And like the work was worth it because, it's moral work, it's just work. And, you know, after being incarcerated and literally being raided, having guns and cameras stuck in your face, doing the perp walk and thrown into the car, after being in a few facilities that have a lot of human rights abuse issues, like just being in an incredibly difficult situation, he's still maintained that same energy where he's like, don't worry about me, just worry about the work. Like literally live free or die. We are Hydra. And I'm very proud of him and very impressed because some people, when they're faced with such adversity, like it's terrifying. And a lot of people wouldn't be able to maintain that same energy, but he's really put his money where his mouth is. And he's the same exact person he was prior to being in the situation.
And it is so impressive because who can blame those that crumble under the weight of the state,
Of
right?
course.
It's that's the whole, and you said it. It's designed that way. They want to make you and your family destitute. They want you to question ever doing work like this again. And you mentioned it's similar to here, and I kind of want to draw a parallel. An 18-year-old in California was arrested, and for making guns, he never shot them, or he says he didn't. It didn't look like he did, and he's going to be facing like 10 years. A lot of the replies were, "Oh, well, he should have got a job. He should have done this the correct way," and things of that nature. In totalitarian states and countries, there is no correct way, right? If you go the legal way, if you're still subverting these systems, they will still get you. They will still target you. And when you're trying to appease the state, there is never a level of appeasement enough that will satisfy them, if that makes sense.
No, for sure. But he's also on the opposite side of that coin where they're trying to kill the idea. And by doing that, they're trying to, diminish the man and discourage the man. But they're failing in that regard. But we still have like a massive battle ahead of us. We still don't have a court date for the actual trial to begin because there's some other paperwork and motions and responses that need to be filed. So he's being held indefinitely because the nature of the crimes, or the accusations rather, are extreme. So now it's justified by the judge to hold him indefinitely. So there's a document that the judge has to sign every 90 days to keep him in custody and sort of reconfirm that they perceive him to be a flight risk because he has been charged, him and the co-defendants, with weapons trafficking charges, money laundering, and then the most hilarious part is the conspiracy, where they kind of cobbled together a few people who really don't have anything to do with his company or his work, but because of Brazilian laws, they need a minimum of 4 people for it to be considered a conspiracy. So this whole case was sort of, the raid and the arrests was all handled by a wing of the police called Geico. It's basically like the organized crime unit, like, or like an FBI sort of level of team. So that's why they're able to retain him and his business partners and co-defendants. Some of the other co-defendants were the people he was in business with, who he started the company Potentio with, which again is all completely legal and above board. And the others were just literally university students, friends he'd done podcasts with, people he was friends with on Steam, but they just needed other people involved to apply a conspiracy charge to it.
Well, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up. And this is what the other governments around the world in the United States particularly wants to do as well. If they label you as a flight risk or a terrorist, then immediately they have the quote unquote excuse that they can hold you indefinitely while they try and find this evidence because you're apparently hiding it. They know it, they just can't prove it yet. It's pretty absurd. And I've got the site pulled up here that our friend Vega has worked on. So zecarioca.cgic.ai, zecarioca.cgic.ai, and this tracks everything, right? Like this has all the filings and everything of that nature in it. Info
Yeah,
about
everything you need to know about the case is there, and it even has some portals on there where you can upload any documents, or if you see articles, videos, like it's all like community oriented, so people can contribute to the archive that we're building around the case, social media, anything.
absolutely. And if you see anything that's for some reason like it wasn't picked up by it or anything of that nature, reach out to Vega Holdings. He will get it in there. He will get it updated almost immediately. He's super fast with this. The machines do most of the work anyway. Go follow him as well. He's done a bunch of cool work. He did a lot of photo shoots originally with the Urutau, and we're talking getting Ubers to drive into the middle of the desert for testing. Very close to the whole situation, and a very good dude. And I just realized we've been talking about this. For those that don't know, kind of this, while he did a lot of work, his seminal work is the Urutau DIY 3D printed bullpup. I've got it on screen here. You can still download it on Odyssey. Karaoke works. And kind of continuing down the line we were going with what's happening in the case and things of that nature, I don't think people understand how horrible the conditions in the first prison he was in were. Like, if we described these conditions, it would be something that would be too graphic for YouTube type shit.
I mean, it's pretty rough. There were a lot of like well documented cases of just overcrowding, and just the overall like conditions are pretty deplorable. But that was the facility he was held in after his initial arrest, and he's been moved, I believe, twice since then. And we do have a custody tracker on the portal as well. So when he's moved around, like you can find that information and know exactly where he's at. But where he's at now, the conditions are much better, but still not great. Like a lot of the times, a third of the time when the food shows up, it's already spoiled. But the conditions of the facility itself are much better. So he's in a better spot now than he was when he initially got arrested back in March. But again, he's going to be in there pretty much indefinitely until there's a resolution with the trial. I would imagine they're not going to want to let him out, because that's a part of the pressure you want to apply to people when you're trying to, demoralize them or discourage them for continuing down their path.
Oh, 100%. And I'm glad it's improved, but we're still talking about like a Brazilian prison, right? Like
Yeah,
it's
it's not
not
best case scenario, really. Yeah, it's a
yeah, it's not he's not in a condo right now. It's not
precisely.
uh it's not terrific by any means, but you we talked about the intimidation point and the scaring people. Putting them in an absolute shithole is a known tactic as well, right? You put them in the absolute dumps, immediately strike fear into them and hope they would crumble, and you described his resolve not crumbling. An incredible amount of will and an incredible testament to what he believes.
No, absolutely. And there's sort of a crossover in this community of people who are sort of advocates or activists, and then on the other end of the spectrum, hobbyists. And I feel like most people in America or the West, they sort of fall somewhere in between, where it is a hobby. Some people might have some political beliefs or philosophical beliefs, but for him, it was much more on the philosophical side. It obviously started as like a hobby, just to pass the time, as he said, but he was really inspired by the work of Jay Stark and his whole attitude and mentality and philosophy. So the Urtao itself is sort of a spiritual successor to the FGC 9. It's not like necessarily derivative, but it was inspired by it. When he first got into CAD, he would literally have to like crawl on the roof of the building he was in to steal Wi-Fi from an adjacent building just to download the files and then go inside and do the work. It was on like a 2009 MacBook with like 4 gigs. So it was like a very painful process, but he was sort of let down a little bit or underwhelmed by the Mark II release, where he thought it was going to be something much more different, or a more radical change as opposed to just some quality of life upgrades. So that's what inspired him to begin work on the Urutau and develop something in 380. And that's where the whole process began for him. And now he's got an entire suite of guns that he's designed. Many of them have been tested, some more than others. And with his work with Potentia and starting the new company, there was some very exciting products coming down the pipeline with some prototypes that they developed. Obviously, this is all on hold now, but um, that's sort of his origin story to a certain degree about how we got interested in this space. And it definitely skews more towards the philosophical. And
It's so
when you're coming from such a authoritarian part of the world as well, it kind of makes sense where you have to rely on DIY. You have to like be self-reliant because the government really isn't going to assist you.
Oh, 100%. It's so inspiring. And seeing it take off everywhere in the past few years, multiple have been discovered and are seized or stolen by the government in Australia, obviously,
Hmm.
quite a few in Europe, Canada. And I think we really do lean on hobbyism more in the United States because of that lack of necessity, right? Like, because in the majority of states, it's just taken for granted at some points.
Absolutely. Yeah,
And
no, it's one of those things where it's incumbent, I think, on a lot of Americans to sort of take advantage of the situations we have in many states to try and push the technology as far as we can for people who are in much more restricted areas. But the the motivation I understand, we're like, who's going to want to put hours and hours into developing like a DIY fire control group when you can just order one for $30 or less and have it shipped to your doorstep? Like, but I feel like that's sort of the trade-off where we can have a much larger impact on people's quality of life in restricted zones in the world if we take advantage of, the freedom we do have, even though in many regards it's sort of shrinking and reducing here in different states.
no, 100%. And I want to encourage people, even if they don't build, use your voice. Like, this is
Hmm.
a fight against an entire system. And while we're uh, I'll have the donations and stuff on screen, and we'll have links to the gifts and go and everything to help his family. Like, this is a fight against authoritarianism worldwide. Like, I view him as a
Absolutely.
symbol in so many ways because we look at flock cameras in the United States. We look at states trying to target 3D printed gun designers and those who even share files. And it quickly looks like a scenario that could turn into these countries where if you share a post about a 3D printed gun, they're going to arrest you. If you have files on your phone, they're going to tag you for distribution. Alvin Bragg, in fact, in New York, said we have a quote unquote workaround. He called it a workaround, where for every file and gun, they add an additional manufacturing charge. That's their quote unquote workaround to trump up charges for people, to put them in situations like our friend the Parrot is in here. And for those that think, oh, it can't touch me, it's just in Brazil, it's just in Australia, it's just in fucking the UK, that's not the case at all. Like, the parrot is the parrot's cause warning. Like, it is a warning that this will happen everywhere if you don't stand up against it.
No, absolutely. And that's something that I would really implore people to sort of understand is like, it might seem like it doesn't affect us here in America or other places in the West because, oh, it's in Brazil and this is an extreme example of authoritarianism, but these governments all work together in lockstep. And if they could have the type of authoritarian systems here that they do down there, they would love that. And even just with how this case progressed on the timeline, you're seeing cooperations between American intelligence agencies and Brazilian intelligence agencies. This all really began with Homeland Security intelligence making a report on the Parrot and then sending that information to the AIBN, which is the intelligence apparatus of the Brazilian government, is essentially like their CIA, for lack of a better term. And so you have the intelligence apparatus of the Department of Homeland Security at the time sending information to the Brazilian government, letting them know who he was, what he was doing, and that's when they started monitoring him more closely. And since that intelligence agency has been moved under ICE, which is like a whole other interesting conversation to have, but you're seeing a relationship between intelligence agencies in different countries sending information back and forth. And that's just another example of like how this does have an impact on people in America and how this relationships between governments and intelligence and like the agendas they share, like it's a very wide reaching issue and it can have potential to touch everyone in very adverse ways.
No, 100%. And as the it is designed to be a giant web essentially of these connected organizations, the CIA, these law enforcement organizations around the world. The UN's expanded their Center for Disarmament Research. They want to connect all these people. You talk about the CIA and intelligence. Abigail Spanberger in Virginia went from CIA operations officer to Moms Demand Action volunteer to governor. And you can really draw these straight lines. So often, people of our ilk and our friends, sometimes rightfully, are accused of being a little paranoid or conspiracy brained. But the lines are pretty straight, right? Like it is from the U.S. They notify Brazil this happens. Like this isn't we don't have a giant whiteboard out like drawing a but it's not Charlie and Always Sunny
Mhm.
drawing a bunch of arrows. It this is how it happened.
No, for sure. And he had visited America prior to this for a few weeks, visiting family and some internet friends out here and just exploring the American experience. And applying for a visa to come back and visit again, he was denied. And that was a big part of this, I think, also, is just his work, who he is, the idea of what he is. That was a big part of that. And so after the exchange of information, they sort of sat on it for a few years, but it was handed off to the Sao Paulo police and the Geico, and they're the ones who conducted the raid. But they sat on the information for a very long time. If he was a critical threat or a serious threat or a terrorist or like gang leader that they're accusing him to be, like they would have acted much sooner. And even the warrants for the arrest were signed in February by the judge, and they waited several weeks to actually conduct the raids later in March. So, and it's also quite convenient that this is all occurring, in an election year, 7 months before an election, where they want to look tough on crime and have this attitude. And his face is all over the media, newspapers, news shows. Him and his colleagues and co-defendants have all already been tried in a court of public opinion, and they're just terrorists, enemies of the state, and they haven't even had a trial date set yet. And so to me, that's what indicates he is somewhat of a political prisoner because they're just using him, in this election year to have a certain perception on this administration. Because the main charge, like the backbone of the charges against them, they're being charged with 46 counts of illegal firearms commerce under the Brazilian disarmament statute. That's law 10.826, Article 17. And that all stems from selling 30 round Glock magazines online. And the way the system works in Brazil is some laws can be changed or augmented or repealed through presidential decree. And under Bolsonaro, he relaxed some of the Brazilian gun control laws. And so he basically deregulated magazine manufacturing and possession, where in the past it was regulated, all had to be registered, and it was like strictly monitored. But he made those changes to where anyone could manufacture them, anyone could possess them, and it was completely legal. And even after he did this, the army themselves, who sort of oversees all the gun control, they confirmed like his interpretation of the law change, stating, reaffirming what he said, that it is legal to possess, it's legal to manufacture. And so for a period of about a year, he was selling those magazines online. And again, this was a way to take care of his family. And, you know, you're paying bills, you're getting groceries, like actually just trying to make ends meet. And it was legal then, it's still legal now. And that's the backbone of this case, is saying, well, he committed this crime, but there's no crime. But what you're seeing is um, the other wing of the parties coming in, and they're trying to reverse some of these laws, or like still enforce the laws as they were under the previous regime. That's where it becomes a bit of like a political tug of war, and he's sort of being used as a pawn in this. And the same thing with trying to build a case against him to make it seem as severe as possible, to hold him as long as they are. You have the money laundering charges, which essentially, the absence of evidence is evidence. Like their entire case is basically admitting they don't have any evidence against him, because they can't track the use of the Monero. They can't track where it's going, how it's been spent, who it's coming from. But they also, on the other side, have absolutely no evidence that these funds have been misused. Like they don't have any evidence. And so essentially, privacy is just illegal in Brazil. And through his advocacy for XMR as a platform, promoting it, accepting it publicly, and then attending the conference, that was enough for them to say, all right, well, again, if you have something to hide, then you must be a criminal, because why would anyone need privacy, right? And that's sort of the cultural change that authoritarian systems try to like implant into the minds of the public is, well, you don't have anything to hide. Why would you need to use that? Clearly, this is just designed for criminals, because our attitudes have privacy have been changed and eroded over decades, where the advent of social media, people are willing to overshare and sort of spy on themselves. And so we've sort of forfeit the notion of privacy that we used to have and cherish, which is also a human right that is still very much downstream of, self-defense.
No, exactly, and it shows you why they want to take these guns. And we talked about. I don't want to like harp on it too much, but I don't think you can even. It's all connected. Like the flock stuff. These are the exact excuses you hear from people talking about the flock stuff. Oh, if you don't aren't doing anything bad, why do you have anything to hide? Oh, if you're stopped by the police randomly, well, if you're not doing anything bad, why do you have anything to hide? And it just escalates. It really does escalates. Something I want to touch on, and we haven't quite gone over yet, is the conference. For those that don't know, the Monero conference wasn't a conference on guns or anything of that nature.
Correct. It's just a conference structured around Monero coin itself and the privacy community, decentralized movements. But for the most part, most of the other presentations are either on the highly technical side, as far as like the coding, or like the new systems that they're implementing to sort of refine and improve how the privacy coin functions. And then you have some people who are on like the philosophical side, who are more like discussing the need, or the intellectual aspect of the privacy community, and like what decentralization movements should look like, building parallel systems, opting out of the technocratic state and dystopias that we see being erected around us. But there was significant crossover for him, because he's showing a specific use case for the coin and how the privacy can be implemented. And our mission when we went there was to sort of build a pipeline between like the Monero Bros and the Printy Boys and show the overlap between this, because to me, in various ways, there are like different pillars of decentralization, and to really build parallel systems that can compete or can actually function efficiently, you have to kind of take a step back and see the larger picture and see how all of these things complement one another, and about how you can push the financial end of the decentralization technology and privacy technology to a certain extent, but it really doesn't mean anything if you can't secure and protect what you're earning, if you don't have that ability for self-defense, and vice versa with some of the other like important elements of decentralization. So that was the overall goal, was to like expose these people to some of these ideas and encourage people when they're working in their like niche fields in privacy and decentralization to consider the impact or the effect it could have on the other pillars, and sort of work towards making a more like efficient or unified vision for what decentralization could look like in actual practice. And so that was something that, like, after each presentation at the conference, there would be a couple questions, a little Q&A segment. You know, you'd have one or two people holding their hands up, and then after the presentation, you have one-on-ones on the floor around the event venue. But his topic and his presentation was so provocative and so sort of outside of the box of like the normal content at the conference, that he really did steal the show, where at the end of his presentation there was, you know, a dozen hands in the air. The Q&A segment went long, and then even after the cameras were off and the conference is ended, there was still an entire scrum of people who came up to the stage, and he sort of stayed on stage for another, you know, 20-30 minutes just answering questions. And it was very encouraging to see how enthusiastic a lot of these people were, and like how interested they were in like the technology and engaging in how it all works and what it all meant for them, even if 100% of those people are never going to build a gun, they're never going to use a 3D printer in that manner. Like, they still were engaged and wanted to understand like the impact it had on the work they were doing. And it was a very proud moment for me to kind of sit back and watch him holding court and really be in his element and just sort of spread the signal. And really, like, I felt in that moment we accomplished the mission that we had set out to do, by sort of establishing that pipeline and opening people's eyes to like, it's important to be hyper focused on our strengths and the things that we work on, but we also have to understand like, we have to integrate it into the other elements of the broader movement if we're going to have like a functional and efficient, decentralized or parallel systems.
No, 100%. It has to be a unified front in a way where everyone understands a combination of what's at stake, what the goals are, things of that nature. And it's so cool to hear that and think people who live in countries where, again, highly illegal, they're never going to print a gun. They aren't even interested in firearms. But seeing that they hold this of high value is so sick, and that's awesome. You guys got to experience that.
No, it was. I wasn't sure exactly what to expect as far as the reception, but it was overwhelmingly positive, and I think very successful. Um, it would be interesting to see more of that in the future, but again, like, there's photographs that I took, stills of him from the presentation in the actual indictment document, where him attending the conference is being used against him and made as a claim that he's, you know, some type of like cartel leader, like criminal mastermind. Like, there's literally a diagram with his picture at the top of the pyramid and the arrows pointing down to the other guys, and it's all completely laughable because these are all just really nerds and autists and STEM kids, you know.
Oh yeah. It's so funny, the idea that it's like this is a RICO, this is an organization, a crime organization building a network, and then it's actually how do you point a gun? How do you do that? Literally, it's I mean, you can go find pictures online, but you put it this way: it was a fat nerd talking to a bunch of other nerds. Like,
Yeah, and the most laughable part about it is they're alleging that him and um, his business partners that he started this company with, the crimes they committed, like the company didn't even exist at the time. Like the alleged crimes, they're not crimes; they're completely legal. So in the presidential decree, it was in February of 2021. They explicitly excluded the detachable magazines from the PCE classification, so they're completely legal. And he sold those for a short time period. But then, flash forward several years, now he's got this company, and they're saying, "Oh, well, this company, these guys are involved in a conspiracy, and they were selling legal products." Like none of it really adds up. And the same thing with the money laundering charges. Like they have no evidence, but they're still using weaponizing the legal system against him just to sort of drag him through this process.
100%. And we talked about that's what government, that's what wealthy people can do is the process can be the punishment, right? Like it
Mhm.
be,
Exactly.
because of how arduous it is physically, mentally, financially, obviously, the process can be the punishment. And something I want to stress too is he was very intentional in following laws to the T. And when we say he didn't break any laws, we're not like, well, he broke stupid laws. No, he didn't break any laws. That is what, like, simply it. And for those confused on the timeline, again, the entire timeline with all the information is on the site. And you have here, I have on screen, 552 years in prison. That's the current amount he's facing, and that should, if anything, show you how laughable this is.
Yeah, the prosecution, they want 6 to 12 years per count, and so that would put you anywhere from 276 to 552 years if served consecutively, plus a 2.3 million dollar fine in Brazilian reals, which is like just a little under like $500,000, like half a million in U.S. dollars. And I mean, it's comical. I'm very confident that he's going to get out of the situation sooner than later. Best case scenario, he could be out by Christmas with perhaps like a probation or work release type of situation. But worst case scenario, he could do a couple of years also. I think it's unlikely to see like a life sentence for this because it is really just like it's political catnip at this point. He's just being used in the situation where the new president is sort of trying to deconstruct all the reforms under the previous administration. And so that's why they're sort of just hand waving the idea that, oh, these detachable magazines are still legal because they're operating under the pretext that no, we don't perceive them as such, but the laws have not changed to reflect that. The army themselves like released a statement saying, yes, these are no longer regulated, so there's no crime.
And I want to stress too, like, not that our police are any better. American police are the same exact way. You can see like the bricks and minifig story. It
Mhm.
it police just operate like this, but also police and government agencies do not give a fuck. They're incentivized. They want more people in cages. Like that's their whole bit. The more people are in cages, the safer their job is, the more money they make in future employment. They tout this on resumes how many people they get locked in a cage. Like this is something they hold in high regard. So even when you do things completely correct, they will find a reason. Do not simp for the state. If you are simping for the state, ask yourself if you've recently had a traumatic brain injury, if whatever else it may be. But we joke, but it is seriously ridiculous to see people standing up for states that do this. And again, holding him up as an example, they want to do this everywhere. That's why they're so intent on making him a like attacking him and making an example out of him is because they don't want other people to do this. Like that, it's as simple as that.
Absolutely. And like I said, he's already been tried in the court of public opinion. His face and name are being smeared all over the place. And they've already considered this a victory as far as like the cultural impact is concerned. And they go into this having the knowledge that it's likely that this won't be sustained, like he won't be held indefinitely and they won't get the maximum. But at the end of the day, it's already a victory for them. And even if he does get released, oh well, this is, the system has failed us. We need to work harder to change the laws, and it'll get memory hold anyway. So the damage is already done as far as the impact on his life and the others that were drug into this who have nothing to do with it.
100% derailing work, derailing future contract potential. They want to ruin your life. And again, we kind of talked about even it, like obviously he's not going to be in jail 552 years, but that just shows the absurdity because the process is the punishment. He's had to spend months in fucking Brazilian prison. Like that, and that already is overkill for someone who was like following the law to the letter, like going through every process that a person who would quote unquote do it quote unquote legally would do.
Yeah, and it's again, they're trying to kill the idea, and by doing that, they're trying to crush the man. But you
Absolutely.
see, the system is already so corrupt, so the cards are already stacked against you, and so you just kind of you have to ride it out and do the best you can. But it's put a significant financial strain on his family, which I mean, they're already struggling in Brazil. It's like very tough to make ends meet in that country, and we're looking at least $50,000 in just taking care of the legal fees and keeping the family supported and keeping things moving. So there's the psychological strain, the financial strain. Like they try and squeeze you in any way you can, and
And,
that's why we're doing what we're doing now and trying to get as much support as we can to try and take some of that burden off of their shoulders.
and you mentioned the $50,000. That's the number on the Gibson Go. I want to see that crushed. Hoffman recently raised a ton, and that's great for him. I love his mission. I love his mission. He's not facing any jail time. Right?
Right.
It's a copyright thing. The community needs to step up and rally behind this because we've talked so much about like the philosophical impact and what this means. This is representative of so much more than bullshit copyright law. This is them targeting a man and his family. You mentioned the burden on the family. Being in a cage and knowing your family is struggling. They are putting this man through hell. And it's legitimately evil. It makes me sick to my stomach. It's disgusting. We as a community, these systems, we talk about working outside of these systems are propped up by actions like this. They survive because of actions like this. We have to work outside of them. Please, if you can afford it, give money. If you can't, understand things are tight. Share, explain
Mm-hmm.
the story, talk about this story in real life to people. So many people don't understand what's going on. We talked about, oh, it's in Brazil. That seems so far away. I mean, in reality, this could be the case for people in a number of states now, particularly as elections churn and things of that nature. It is urgent. It is very real, very serious, and it's horrific.
No, it really is. And all we can do is, focus on what we can control and just try and raise funds to try and support the family and try and, take some of that burden off of their shoulders. But when you're fighting a corrupt system, it's like we said, it's designed to drain you, it's designed to wear you down. And I mean, the system is so corrupt in so many ways, but there was even a piece of evidence introduced by the Ministry of Justice that was shown to be a doctored photo, where in the photo they're using an airsoft rifle, but the orange safety tip was removed to make it look like an actual firearm. And like So you've already got lies and disingenuous information in this indictment. Like, and when the system is going to overlook those things and indulge those things, like that's how big of a uphill battle this is going to be. But I
Uh,
think it's important to remain optimistic and to maintain positive energy and momentum moving forward, because I still think there's plenty to be optimistic about, and I think things will work out in the long run. But it's going to be a slog to get there. We have a long way to go.
no, 100%. And again, please donate. And I kind of want to, I'll give you a word after this. I kind of want my closing message to people to be, uh, what would he do? Right? He would look how strong he is standing and let that inspire you. I'm just talking and thinking about it. I'm getting goosebumps right now. Jay Stark being held up as a martyr and this being a along that, not like you mentioned, not totally derivative, but a on the tree of the FGC9 per se, and holding those exact same values, standing strong in a Brazilian prison. There is no reason you can't stand up against Flock in your neighborhood. There's no reason you can't stand up against gun laws in your state. There is no excuses, right? And look at him for strength. He is being so strong right now. I can't even imagine. And I myself am so impressed. Anyone who reads this, I think, should be impressed with him, with his resolve, with his will. Familiarize yourself with his work. You mentioned a ton of cool projects down the pipeline that this obviously delays, but he had a ton of cool stuff out. The Urutau is very comprehensive. The documentation is fantastic. He talks about his philosophical beliefs in that. Uh, and everyone, please, I've got the gifts and go up. Joseph the Parrot / Zakarico Legal Defense. We'll be linking that as well. And thank you for coming on Goat to talk about this. This is so important to me. It's, in my opinion, the one of the pivotal cases of our time, and it's so important. We show support. He feels that support. His family feels that support.
No, absolutely. No, I really appreciate you having me on and helping boost this signal and get this message to as many eyes and ears as possible, because it is a massive thing. And I would implore other people to, pursue their own avenues of activism as well. But there are inherent risks, obviously, as we see with his case. But oftentimes the alternatives to not taking action and not providing pushback are much worse down the road long term. So that's sort of the trade-off we have to make sometimes. But everybody is able to work within their own comfort zone, and he really put himself out there, and so now he's getting the fight that he asked for, and I think it's going to work out well for him in the long term. So
And
for now, all we can do is continue to, spread the message and keep that positive energy. We've got the Give, Send, Go, where people can donate. We've got some crypto wallets, Bitcoin wallets, Lightning, and all those wallets, the custody of those are all controlled by his mother, Andrea, and all the money from the Give, Send, Goes. And we have some merch fundraisers coming up. That's all going directly to those Bitcoin wallets as well. So every single penny goes directly to the family to help them through this process.
And I've got those on the screen here. Anyone can screenshot it if you're viewing it, or you can go to lopointgoat at lopointgoat on Twitter. He came back specifically for this. It was his primary, like really only reason for coming back on social media is to do this. And thank you for what you're doing for your friend. It is so important, like you said, to understand the risks. But at the same time, I think people should understand, even when you do things legally, fully legally, this can be the result, right? If they want to
Mhm.
target you, they will. He did everything by the book. We're not talking about other situations where people are posting insane shit, people are posting videos, IG lives with FRTs, whatever it may be. This was someone who did it completely by the book, and the state still targeted him. There's no amount of goody two shoes or sucking up to the state that will stop them from targeting you.
Yeah, sometimes the compliance can just encourage like further subjugation or exploitation. So there's
In
a
fact,
fine
I
line
think
you have to walk.
absolutely. In fact, I think that's why they're digging so deep, right? Because they continue to not find things. They search the guns, the money, whatever it may be, and they're trying to throw anything on the wall that sticks. Uh, Salute to him for standing strong in his principles, knowing he's doing the right thing, doing it the right way. Because if he had got sloppy, this case would not be near as strong, right? For him, for doing things the right way, for being a very specific kind of autist. I appreciate it so much. I appreciate his philosophy. Everyone go follow and read about. There's infinite amounts you can read about on the site Vega Compiled, and the Gifts and Go is quite long and explains the case as well. Really want to get some money to support his family. Please go donate, and I appreciate you guys listening, and talk to you guys later.